Hi, this is Paul Slatkis, and we have a very exciting show today. We're going to talk about 2021's best and worst cities for basketball fans, a Water Hub study, and Jill Gonzalez is a representative from Water Hub. Hi, Jill. How are you?
Hey there, good. How are you?
All righty, good. We also have Dr. Larry Gluck on the line. Hey, Larry, how are you?
Good, Paul.
Good. And Austin Tong, how you doing, Austin?
Fine, how are you?
All righty, good. So, Jill, we looked at the document here, find the best cities for professional and college basketball fans. Sports is can be frenetic, and people can get all excited and be happy or sad. And this is good news. So we want to talk about the happy, but the fact is that not everybody's happy because sometimes in sports, somebody wins and somebody loses. And so, Jill, tell us about your research. How did you study fans in different cities? How'd you go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basketball is the second most popular sport in America now. It came off of both a rough year because revenue went down, obviously, due to the pandemic, but also a very successful year with the bubble. Um, so we looked at a lot of different things here, and we tried to be as scientific as possible because, like you said, sports really involve a lot of passion. But we looked at 21 different metrics. So these are all existing data points that we drew from fan engagement on social media to franchise value to the performance level of the teams over the past few seasons, to how much the stadium can hold, how much a ticket costs. So that's essentially where we looked. And the site is Wallet Hub, and that's why we included some of uh, these financial metrics as well. So obviously, if you can get to a game for cheaper, that's better for you as a fan.
Uh-huh. And so, what do you mean a wallet hub? That's a research um, opportunity for people to actually share their thinking.
Wallet Hub is the site that I work with. So it's a, we do the research
Oh,
and put out these studies.
I apologize. I pronounced it wrong. Wallet hub. I think I said water hub. So sorry.
That's okay.
We do a lot of water shows. We have the water hour. Please excuse me. Wallet hub, meaning there's some money involved with this too. I mean, if you have a lot of fans, that means you have a greater potential for revenue um, in the seats. Isn't that correct?
Exactly. So we not only look at franchise value, but we also look at the average ticket price, both for an NBA and for a college game here. Because again, if we're looking at this from a financial perspective and you can get to a game for cheaper, that's going to be better for you as a fan.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let's talk about some best cities.
So
What did
some
you
of
come
the
up with?
best, yeah, some of the best cities this year, and they do change from year to year, include LA, Boston at number two, Salt Lake City at three, Philadelphia at four, San Francisco at five, and then Miami, San Antonio, Houston, DC, and Oklahoma City round out the top 10.
All right, so now let's get to the worst cities.
So the worst cities, at least in terms of some of the bigger cities here, um, and not all of them have teams, or at least not all of them have NBA teams, but Indianapolis is toward the bottom of the bigger cities. Denver, Detroit, Memphis, Cleveland, all down here toward the bottom.
That's actually funny. Indianapolis, I have a board member who's a Hoosier, and she said, bottom line, the best city is Indianapolis.
Right. Well, when you're a fan of the team, that's going to be your favorite city for basketball and most sports, I would think.
Uh-huh. Dr. Luck, Larry, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share? Ask a question or so?
I have a question. The New York Knickerbockers have a very, very religious fan base and popularity in New York City. Where did they wind up?
So New York is in the top 15, and it has, two teams obviously included here. So it is in the top 15. It ranks at number 14th, but it's also one of the most expensive cities to go watch a game in person, especially this year because of COVID-19 and how limited supply was. And then, the Knicks are very good, but the Nets are not. So that unfortunately, both go into the performance data for New York.
Okay. One more question I have for you. In general, do you think this price of a ticket to a game is way overpriced, or do you think it's a fair price in most cities?
In some cities, I know it's great. I mean, I, for instance, moved from Washington, D.C. to New York City. And I know, in D.C., maybe not this year because they're doing better, but, a couple years ago, you could get a seat and a soda for $25. Same can be said for Philly, like 5 years ago. In New York, that has not been the case for a very long time. So I do think, it just depends where you live and of course how the team is doing, how much buzz there is. But in some cities, pretty large cities, they're still reasonably priced.
Okay.
I would say much better priced than, a football ticket.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. How about Austin? You have a thought? You love sports.
But see, my favorite team isn't like available because I love the Seattle Supersonics.
So why aren't they available? What do you mean not available?
Because they are non-existent.
That's a good.
So, Jill, what do you do about non-existent teams?
Well,
because they
did
changed their
exist
name
at one point,
and they went somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and I just don't care for Oklahoma City Thunder.
I see.
Yeah, Seattle ranks, it's still on here. It ranks 34th out of the large cities in terms of, where to be if you're even a fan. And I'm sure there are still some Supersonics fans there. But yeah, it's hard when your team moves, and especially when it moves somewhere so far away and so different.
And he's in New Jersey, and he still loves them. I mean, it's very interesting that I personally am still a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and they moved a real long time ago to Los Angeles. What do you think it is, Joe? Was there any other, like sociographic or kinds of thoughts about why do people get? I mean, we're talking actually NBA so far. I mean, college is another level, it seems to me, but. Just in general, did anything come up of why people get so excited and love their teams or dislike their teams? Any questions in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, we also looked into just strictly fan engagement, and how many people are talking about their teams on social media. So for the NBA, for instance, Miami right now has the most engaged fans, even though they're not, necessarily the best team. They don't necessarily have the buzz they used to have when they had, a triple threat. But their fans still seem to be very engaged, which is interesting because there's a lot of other things to do in Miami and the weather is nice. But, they still have this fan base that is still very engaged. You see the same thing in Boston. You do see the same thing in Oklahoma City. And so, I think it really is a lot of different things, whether it's kind of holding on to the past and maybe being influenced by a winning team or, a championship team and a parade, if those fans are still there and kind of clutching onto that, or it could be the buzz of new players. I mean, there's so many things that can influence that. And when we talk about college basketball, there I think it is more steeped in tradition. So the most engaged college basketball fans, we have Chapel Hill and Durham pretty much tied, which makes sense. And then we have Lawrence, Kansas. We have Bloomington, Indiana. So they're your Hoosiers. We have, College Park in Maryland. So all of these teams, when we talk about college, tend to have much more of a tradition and generational fans. Whereas the NBA, it really fluctuates.
Did you ask a question? March Madness actually was the original excitement here, and I love basketball. I have a basketball. I sleep with the Harlem Globetrotters, and so we love basketball. Was there anything in regard to March Madness? That seems to be like a pickup, and it's like the NBA Finals. Any commentary on the March Madness time?
Yeah, we did a report for March Madness as well, and kind of looked at again the best cities to be a college basketball fan, and a lot of that again had to do with tradition. This year was very different because it was the first time that one single state hosted the tournament in its entirety. After obviously it was canceled for the first time ever last year, so it definitely looked a lot different, as we all saw. But I think again, it proved to be very much a success. So I think both the NBA and the NCAA, at least when it comes to basketball, really showed how it can be done under hardship. And it just was harder to do, I think, with the NFL and with college football with so many different outbreaks.
Do you think that opinions change? Like, I had Gonzaga to win this March Madness, but we had a little, family bet of some sort, and Baylor pulls it off. You think do opinions change when you lose?
I don't know if opinions change when you lose in March Madness because it is so, based upon surprises and Cinderella stories and upsets. I think people love it just as much for the upsets as they do for, their team winning. I, for instance, I'm an Ohio State fan and my team was out in the first round. But then you find, a new team to root for. And I think we still know, which teams are good at basketball and which historically have been good at basketball. So I wouldn't say opinions really changed from March Madness just because it's really such a gambler's tournament and people like to see all the volatility.
Ohio State's the Buckeyes?
Yes.
Yeah. I got a buddy that's Buckeyes or nothing.
Yeah. Well, he did not have a great March then.
He didn't. He even told me, I don't know. They're not so good, as good as they usually are. But he's a fanatic about them. Any other bits of information you'd like to share from the study, Joe?
I think that's, obviously this is not telling you which city to go for basketball or which team to root for, but I do think it's fun to look at in terms of, how things shake out from year to year. This list always changes from year to year because performances change, obviously championships change, and even, depending on how much buzz a team has, franchise value, ticket prices, all those things change. So it's cool to see, how cities move up or down on these rankings.
Okay. Dr. Gluck, do you have a last question that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Are you a basketball player in college?
No, I ran track.
Okay, let me ask a question. Do you think sports play is it too much of a business to be supported by universities?
I do think that sports is very much of a business and that players should be more compensated than they are, especially after having gone to, such a powerhouse school for both football and basketball and seeing, you know, how much draw they bring to the school, how much pressure they're under, how much work they put in. I think athletes should definitely be compensated more than they are.
Well, I was getting to the point where the majority of colleges lose a lot of money on sports. And do you think that's a good way to lose money rather than hiring professors or building a beautiful laboratory for science rather than a beautiful locker room for football players? That's my question.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about the schools that are not as good at sports as my
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing here is that people are paying to the majority of people are paying to be educated. And that's where the majority of money should also be going. So, taking funds from about 90% of students who don't play sports and giving a locker room to the 10% that do, I don't think is fair.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Either do I.
Okay, Jill, that's kind of you to share your own opinions here in that regard. And Austin, do you have any last comment?
No,
Okay, but he's a sports
nothing.
guy. You know what?
Thank you.
My last
Thank you.
comment. My last comment is thank you, Jill, because one big thing about sports is people seem to love statistics. They love to know how many points were scored in the first half. That this guy's breaking this record. I mean, the statistician in any sporting event seems to be like the number one job, and they're feeding the announcers and the hosts with every kind of you get up to the bat and they got 14 stats. So your research is very, very important. Thank you, Jill, for sharing it.
Yes,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for
Let
having
me
me on.
ask
It
you
was a
one last
pleasure.
question. What's your good news? What's the good news for you today, Jill?
Well, I'm a Sixers fan, so things are looking very good for us. That is my good news because I do remember, 5 years ago, you could barely sell a Sixers ticket. And now that is not the case. So
yeah.
I'm glad they've had fans that have stuck by them much longer than AI has left us. And now we're back near the top.
Okay, fantastic. Jill, thanks so much. And thank you, Wallet Hub, for sharing this interview with us. Take care.
Bye.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you.
Bye, Paul.